Okay, welcome back to What If History Restarted. This is episode 52, I believe. Last time was another pretty important episode, as it was the peace treaty for World War One. Other than the actual peace treaty, we saw some alliances be established, such as the economic alliances in South America, Europe, the Middle East / India, as well as some military alliances, 2 in North America and 1 in Southeast Asia. So yeah, that's pretty important. Only other thing we saw happen on the map was that the remnants of the Estonian country kind of rebelled, and they ended up becoming this new country, this new Estonia, which may or may not be a little bit fascist, but oh well. So that's where we're going to be picking up off of today, I guess. World War One ended in 1914, and by now it's probably like 1920, if not a little bit. No, it's probably 1920. So a little bit of time has passed, and the countries are starting to have fully recovered. But some of them are not doing too great, such as over here in South America, where these two countries that were both on the losing side of World War One have been kind of crippled by the war, and they are not doing too good. They have very corrupt governments and all that, and things are going to boil over, and eventually this country down here breaks out into full-on civil war. So we're just going to use like red and blue, like these aren't the final colors, but just because it's easy to see. So we have this red rebellion up here. These guys are trying to become a breakaway state. We have this blue rebellion over here. These guys are trying to become, these guys are trying to overthrow the current government and become like the new government. And finally, we have this yellow one up here. These guys want to join the Chilean country over here. And yeah, obviously this is a very decent amount of land that is now rebelling away. And we see that the red country is at first the most successful. The blue, and that's mostly because the blue and yellow teams have been a little bit too focused on fighting each other. But eventually we can see that, the original government here is kind of dying. The red team takes the burden of knocking out the capital, which does allow for the blue team to make a pretty big resurgence and even go all the way down here. We then see that this last little area is filled in by the rest of these teams, and now the red team is almost satisfied with their territory, but they want they're supposed to be a breakaway state, but they really want all of this for themselves. So they start going into the yellow team as well. The blue team finishes them off, and the red team asks if the red team wants that war to end here. The blue team is not so willing, so the blue team is going to march into the capital and retake it. And we see that fighting continues, with the red team continuing to get pushed back, until eventually we settle on something a little bit like this. And that is the peace when the peace treaty is signed. So we undo all of this. You're going to see that the Chilean rebels, unfortunately, were not successful, so nobody's joining Chile. I still don't really know how you pronounce it. But we do see that the red rebellion was successful, in that there's now going to be this new country over here, which is about half of this. Well, it's probably a little bit more than half, actually. 3 south. Yeah, we'll give this team a little bit more land. But yeah, we have this new red country over here, which is that red rebellion. Of course, it needs a capital, which will be right here. And this is the blue rebellion as their new government, as the new government of this country. And they are now pretty, they're pretty fascist, or at least just very, authoritarian. So that's not great, but they do still exist, and thankfully they're kind of there's not really that much land for them to expand into, because, obviously they would get swept by either the Chilean countries, and they just fought a war against this one, so that's their best possible course of action, but This country over here is struggling, definitely, but they are not as bad off as this country was, so they're able to maintain themselves, and yeah. Up here in North America, this the prairie country, as I've been calling it, is pretty unhappy about losing a lot of their land, and a lot of these, well, especially these two countries, because these were the main ones that fought against it, definitely hold some grudges against it. I mean, Alaska also fought against it, but like Alaska's kind of just chill. And it's probably, I don't know what it's like over here, but I'm assuming it's probably not great for a capital. But we're gonna ignore that because maybe it is. But anyway, there's definitely some lasting tensions. This country is supported by the Pentagon Alliance, so the prairie country kind of stops messing with it. But this country down here is, for some reason, lacking a capital, so let's go ahead and do that. Bam. Yeah, everything else does, I don't know what's up with this country specifically. But yeah, these guys are now at pretty high tensions with the prairie country, and sure enough, a war is going to break out. This war is pretty brutal, and there's a lot of like genocidal sort of tactics. Well, not even really tactics, just that's kind of what happens. No other country even really bothers to get involved in this war. We see that the blue team starts out by pushing out on the sides. Meanwhile, the prairie country kind of makes this spearhead for the city. However, we see that that does not go too well and gets completely destroyed. The blue country now starts flooding up here. They meet this river, lake. I would assume it's the river. It looks pretty long. But yeah, now the capital of the prairie country is under severe threat, and that's not great. And they're definitely not winning this war. So what do you do in this situation? Well, this country is slightly more aligned to the Pentagon Alliance than to the 3-Point Star Alliance. So a lot of these 3-Point Star countries are already kind of like not in support of this country because they don't want it to turn over to the Pentagon Alliance officially. So Canada is going to go to these two countries down here and say, you know, also I called it Canada. I'm not really sure if that's too accurate, but oh well. But yeah, it goes to these countries right here and says that, you know, they should invade this country. Now, obviously, this is an alliance, but like, it's only all the countries get activated only if one of them's invaded, not necessarily if one invades. So these countries are going to both actually accept, and we see that their troops start pouring out into the border of this country, the blue country. I mean, this is literally just like Colorado, I guess. But yeah, Colorado starts getting beat up. They do manage to take the prairie country's capital and move all the way up here. The government of the prairie country flees to this city, and they actually win that battle. Then cut off some troops here and knock them all out. And now they start recalling some troops to help fight down in the south. Speaking of down in the south, we see that they start to push back this country. And now, basically, obviously, the rest of the 3-Point... Well, this country goes to the rest of the 3-Point Star Alliance and is like, hey, these guys are about to go into my territory. Do you want to help me? But the thing is, they don't, because... Hold on. Because they were the ones that were the aggressor here, so there's no obligation in this 3-Point Star Alliance's treaty to help out this country, because it was the original aggressor. So that's not too great for them, and they start getting invaded. The Pentagon Alliance considers helping out this country, but they're still recovering from World War I, so, you know, they don't really want to. Plus, these countries just had a war, so even them are kind of recovering, although this one's still invading. And yeah, we keep going like this. And eventually the war kind of starts to just stalemate. However, that stalemate is broken when a new country enters the war, that being this pink Arizonan slash Mexican country. Now, why would this country do this? It's because they were not affected by World War One, and neither was Colorado. They were both neutral countries. But this country is, well, they're kind of expansionist now because, a world war has happened, so the entire world has kind of been, shown how quick a massive conflict can break out. So these guys basically have this new policy where they want to just, secure as much power for themselves as possible so that they don't, so that in case of another world war, they will not just get stomped. And also they want to rival the power of this country down here. So yeah, these guys start pushing out into the prairie, into Colorado, and now things aren't looking too good for Colorado. The prairie country manages to kick them out, but the people here are too tired, so they only start invading a little bit, very slowly. They do manage to take that. Well, no, they don't even manage to take that city. They literally just take this, and that's kind of all they can do. And now Colorado completely turns to the south. And now they're going to do something kind of interesting. Now, I did mention that they're kind of, leaning towards the Pentagon Alliance, and that has definitely been solidified now that they're literally at war with 2 of the 3-Point Star Alliance members. But they still don't. But that's really just for the 3-Point Star Alliance members that would be more hesitant to let them in. These guys are still kind of neutral. Fairly neutral. And so they're realizing that this war is not looking too good for them now because they're kind of getting coalitioned. And so they say, hey guys, if you would help me beat up the Arizonan country, and we end our war, then I'll take all my troops out of your country and I'll join the 3-Point Star Alliance. This is a pretty good offer for these guys, and so even though it's kind of unpopular, since, they're literally at war right now, 3-Point Star Alliance, well, mainly Michigan and Carolina are going to convince these countries to accept the offer. No. So with that, we see that their part of the war ends, and these guys are going to be joining the 3-Point Star Alliance. With the help from these 2 countries, they are now able to reclaim all of their lost territory and begin a push into Arizona. They get right up to this vital city and nearly take it, taking all this northern area at least, though. From there, they move down to the south here and cut things off like this. And at this point, the Arizonan country realizes that they kind of made a mistake here, so they're going to sue for peace. And now we get to see how this peace treaty looks out. The tide of war shifted a lot in this war. So the prairie country will be getting a tiny amount of land back. So that's good for them, I guess. Real game changer there. And yeah, obviously, as we already did, this country is now a member of the 3-Point Star Alliance. Just make that a little bit more centered, because that looks weird. But the only other border change here is that these guys will be getting some land from the Arizonan country. And they will now be looking at something like this. So they have this awkward little panhandle here. They're just a weird orb with a panhandle. It's interesting. But yeah, Arizonan country didn't get hit too hard, but that's still not great for them. I believe everything in there is the same ethnicity. Well, everything in the Arizonan country is. As for Colorado, they're actually pretty mixed. Their capital, I believe, their capital is in the European half, but a lot of their territory is now in the Korean half. So that's interesting. But yeah, that is the war in North America. We're now going to turn over to this sort of general area because, a little bit to the east, really, because over here, this Indonesian country that just got set up is very full of corruption and unstable, and we're going to see some rebellions break out once again. So we'll be doing the red and blue thing because I like that. Well, red, blue, yellow, green, all of that. So we have, that's too close to that country, so we'll do, it's too close to Sumatra's color, so we're going to put this one in Borneo. These guys are looking to install a new government. And then this general area, well, hold on. So I just highlighted all of Java, I believe this is, because I was going to show that, like, there is this blue rebellion which wants all of this land. So there, now I phrased that correctly. So yeah, the Java Independence Front down here. And then we have the Sumatra Independence Front up here. These guys want to have Sumatra. Well, the rest of Sumatra. I mean, they also want to have this part, but obviously they aren't really hoping for that now. And so, well, the country, like I just mentioned, is very unstable, and they actually just kind of fall pretty quickly. And then these three rebellions don't even really, like, fight each other after. The only interesting thing is up here, where we do see some, like, pockets of resistance of the other government, especially up here in the north. But also, like, one over here, maybe one down here. So eventually these guys are going to kind of coalesce into two big groups who the Red Rebellion is unable to deal with, and so they are left, so the original government is allowed to exist. They need a new capital, which will be up here, I guess. Obviously that border is not final. Let me just, hold on. Bam, 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 and slam. Grand slam. I'm gonna make some green in the ocean. So we see this very interesting division of the island, because we now have two countries, but one of them has like two halves. So this is a bit, hold on. So yeah, we have this kind of border gory thingy going on, but oh well. As for the red government, we're gonna make them this color. I do too many of those colors. We're gonna make them like, well, that's kind of just the same thing. That looks like Tuscany. Sure, we'll make them that dark purple color. This Java island down here, we'll just make a slightly different shade of blue. Very creative. And we'll actually change that shade just a little because I want to. Over here in the yellow rebellion, we'll make them a little bit more of a yellowish, greenish sort of color. And obviously their capital is going to be their one major city. So yeah, that is Indonesia. And they look terrible now. That's how things tend to go. Out of these new governments, these guys are like they're actually like ended up being a little bit less authoritarian than the original government. These guys are pretty relaxed, and there's not really that much like evil here, I guess. But as for the South Sumatran country, there is a pretty terrible government actually, who is pretty authoritarian. So yeah, these guys are pretty terrible, and they have a dictator who's kind of doing like a little bit of a genocide of all the native people here. You know, the non-Chinese, non-Chinese heritage, because, you know, obviously they are not Chinese, they're Sumatran, but like, they're from China long thousands of years ago. Well, yeah, probably thousands. So yeah, these guys are pretty terrible. This North Sumatran country is actually pretty democratic, so, you know, that's not great. But, yeah. Anyway, we're now turning up here to Oman. That's their name. They are one of the richest countries in the world still, even though they were pretty devastated by World War I, so they have gone down a little bit. They're still pretty well off, and with this new fancy little economic alliance, they are doing pretty good at recovering. You can see this economic alliance, like, includes even, like, all of Anatolia, pretty much the entire Middle East, as well as, like, Caucasia, and even some of India. So it's pretty good for them, and their economy is getting pretty nice. Especially, you know, of course, it's the south times, but Persian coast over here is, like, the most developed area in the entire world. roots back to ancient times. But anyway, what we're going to talk about over here is in this colony. It's a very short distance colony, but still a colony. This used to be the Indus country, and they are a very old country, and they used to have like a massive empire that was like all of this. Maybe I don't think they went into India. They were just like this, I think, maybe. Like roughly this. And so obviously there's still a lot of these people in this country, or in this colony, and a lot of them want independence. And so we're going to see some rebellions form up over here in the eastern edges. These guys managed to encircle this, well, not fully encircle, but like almost encircle this vital city and take quite a few major cities. We move up here, kind of close to the Himalayas, maybe. I'm not sure actually where exactly they are, but they're somewhere. And yeah, probably like accidentally spill over into this country a little bit because there's like literally no one that lives there. I mean, actually, there probably would be some people in the southern half, but like still not a lot. So they might spill over a little bit. And I don't even think that. And they'd probably notice eventually, but they probably wouldn't even care. And this country probably wouldn't either. They would, stop doing. They would stop spilling over. They would just take their land and go. Anyway, then the rest of Oman's military arrives, and these guys get absolutely demolished. But with that, Oman has technically gained some land from this country, so, hooray. And yeah, these people are more upset than ever, and they're more rowdy than ever, because, their government, their rebellion government just got obliterated, and they feel very oppressed by the Omani people. Omani government, I guess. What if we make Oman? Ew. As if they're like full vibrancy. Value. Yeah, I remember our class. Anyway, for our final event down here, we're going to be looking once again at Oman with their relations with this country. This country was a former colony of Sparta, of all countries. And these guys are actually, they're doing decently well. This area used to be like pretty powerful in like medieval times, but obviously that has changed a lot since then. Of course, we also have like this country that used to be the Lake Country Union, which came from the original Yellow Lake Country. So these guys are like the grandchild of the original Lake Country, I guess. But anyway, there's hold on once more. And I kind of forgot where I was, but yeah, these guys exist, and they're kind of powerful. Well, they're not powerful, but they're kind of doing well, just existing. But they're also doing a lot of trading with Oman. They aren't really that aligned with like this sort of group of countries, so they don't join the economic alliance. They are doing a lot of trade. One country that's not doing a lot of trade with Oman is this country. They are a pretty big country. They used to be not that big, but now they are pretty big. After Neo-Hijaz fell. Rest in peace, my goat. But yeah, these guys, they kind of hate Oman, and also Egypt, and kind of just everyone. They aren't too happy of a country. They're not a very happy camper, as some would say. So this country starts getting a little bit too buddy-buddy with Oman. And now these guys are like, this was like the one country that we would kind of trade with, but now they're like done with this country because they're like falling to the Middle Eastern ideologies or whatever. And so we kind of just see that these guys just like isolate themselves and completely stop trading with this country. That is not too great for this country's economy, and they're kind of, failing now. So now they're like, hey, you want to not do that? Can we start trading again? And that's that's a pretty tough question, because there are a lot of people in this country who want to keep trading, because it is pretty stupid to not, and even these guys are also kind of failing. So eventually these guys are going to say, no, we will not be helping you out. However, there's some people down here in the south that are like, no, we gotta do this. and these guys are don't want to listen to them. But when these guys start to like rebel, they are now like, okay, we don't want to do that. How about we just give you independence and then you can trade with them? And so this deal is going to work for them. And there's a lot of this yellow. There's a lot of this yellow ethnicity area because like obviously it kind of makes sense that like the African ethnicity people are going to be trading with the other African ethnicity people. So yeah, a lot of these yellow ethnicity people are going to be. Why is there a little bit of okay, I guess we'll keep that. There's just a little pocket where it's Ethiopian people. But yeah, we see this new country break off. They peacefully, well, pretty much peacefully break off. Obviously, they did do a little bit of a rebellion, but it wasn't too bad. And that looks terrible. And so this pretty large country breaks off, taking up the entire coast over here. They also gotta take these random pixels. Remember, this country is like right off the bat kind of not stable because a lot of these people don't really. They were fine being under the same government when it was under a big government, but now that they're under a small government, it's kind of like having like a bunch of different people all locked up in a small room, and so obviously they don't really want that, and so they all like this country just kind of like shatters after a year or so of being existing. And that is, I guess, unfortunate, but like they're still friendly with each other. There's going to be 3 countries, maybe even 4, if I feel like it. But yeah, they have some very odd borders, but it's fine. Central government is still probably the biggest, but yeah, well, in terms of power and probably size also. So you guys are capitals. Bam, 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 bam. So of course, like obviously the religion layer, it shows religions and some like subsets. Like we have the red and the light red and the dark red and the darker red and the lighter red. But like obviously that's still not every single subgroup because like obviously there's a ton of subgroups, but like they still are there. Just isn't shown because like that would take 10 years and probably like have to change wildly every episode. So like yeah, a ton of subgroups have just become their own nations. Well, I guess they already were nations, but they now have become states. So that's good. But yeah, they're all trading with this country now, and everyone is kind of happy, except for these guys, because they are now landlocked and not doing too great. But, oh well. And that is going to actually be the end of this episode, so, yeah, goodbye.